The wind outside shook the old timber shutters of the frontier cabin, carrying the dry scent of dust and wild sage across the plains. Inside, the lantern, as flame, fluttered faintly, painting coppery shadows on the uneven pine walls. She stood there, fists tightened at her sides, her eyes sharp and watchful, like someone who had walked through too many battles to still put faith in happy endings. Her name was Elara Mayfield, and her life was already carved deep with wounds, regrets, and secrets far too heavy for her young shoulders to bear. Yet tonight, staring across the cabin at the man in the broad hat, she knew there was no more room for silence. The truth had to step out into the open. The stillness between them stretched, taut and brittle, until her voice, fragile but unshaken, broke the quiet. "I am not pure," she said, and the words fell like stones in the quiet of that room. The cowboy, his name was Samuel Creedon, did so much as flinch. He did to release her hand, though the weight of her confession hung between them as thick as the dust in the air. His gray eyes stayed locked on hers, steady as the horizon, watching her with the patience of a man who had weathered tempests and learned never to run from thunder. Elara expected the same familiar reaction she had endured before, the cold recoil, the mask of false kindness that quickly cracked into judgment, or the slow turning away of faces unable to bear imperfection. Her chest rose and fell like a soldier bracing for a blow, but Samuel only tilted his head slightly, the grip on her hand tightening, not to bind her, but to anchor her. His voice came low and unshaken, carrying the quiet weight of the land itself. "Never asked you to be." Those 6 words cut deeper than Elara had ever imagined. She searched his eyes desperately, waiting for mockery, for pity, for the catch that always followed kindness, but she found none. What she found was a man who had walked through fire himself, who bore scars across his knuckles and his back, who had crossed deserts with only a horse and a rifle, who had buried comrades beneath endless skies, and yet somehow had not lost the gentleness now burning in his gaze. Her lips parted, but words snagged in her throat. For so long, her worth had been tethered to what others judged her to be. Men had treated her like a prize to be won. Women had whispered behind her back. She had carried shame like a brand across her soul. And yet here stood this cowboy, boots scuffed with trail dust, hands rough from work, looking at her as if none of that carried weight. His world was wide and brutal, filled with harder things than gossip or scars, and still he chose to see her not as ruined, but as a woman standing tall, unbroken. The lantern hissed faintly. Silence stretched once more, but this time it was heavy. It was soft, like the breath between heartbeats, like the calm after lightning split the sky. Elara's throat tightened, but not with dread, with something perilously close to hope. She tried to pull her hand back, unsure of how to stand in this warmth, but Samuel held on, not to imprison her, but to remind her she wasn't standing alone in the storm. "You don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. "People talk. They'll call me ruined. They'll call me." "Let them talk." Samuel's words cut gently but firmly, his tone as steady as a river carving through stone. "Their words don't fill our bellies. Their words don't raise a home. I am not here for their opinion. I am here because when I look at you, Elara, I see someone stronger than half the men I've ridden beside. And I'll be damned if I let whispers scare me away." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. His conviction was something that could be faked. It sank into her like water into parched earth. Silence fell again, but this time she breathed easier inside it. She had never known a man who didn't measure her worth by what he thought she owed him. Samuel Creedon was like them. He wasn't asking her for purity. He wasn't demanding perfection. He was asking only for truth, and that was something she still had to give. The night deepened outside. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the wind pressed against the cabin walls like restless hands. Elara finally exhaled the breath she'd been clinging to, and sank into the wooden chair at her back. Samuel crouched before her, resting his weather-beaten hat on the floor, bringing his eyes level with hers. "I've fought bandits, Elara," he said quietly. "I buried my brother in cold earth. I've walked into towns where every hand reached for a gun the moment they saw me. None of that scared me half as much as what I saw when I stepped into this room. The fear in your eyes that I look at you and see less than what you are. That fear is worse than any bullet I've faced, and I won't let it live here. Not between us." Elara shut her eyes, her chest rising and falling in uneven waves. His words wrapped around her like the warmth of a fire on a freezing night. No one had ever defended her dignity like this. No one had ever told her she was more than the names the world had thrown at her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to step into that light he held out. For the first time in years, the burden on her shoulders no longer felt immovable. She opened her eyes, and when she looked at him, she did just see a cowboy. She saw a beginning she thought she'd never deserve. And in that cabin, with the wind rattling the walls, the story of Alara Mayfield and Samuel Creedon began not with illusion of perfection, not with fragile promises, but with two souls daring to believe love was greater than shame. Morning broke, spilling golden haze over the mesa flats. The horizon stretched pale and endless, touched with promise. Alara stood outside the cabin, arms wrapped around herself against the dawn, chill, watching Samuel saddle his horse with calm, practiced motions. The memory of last night lingered in her chest, his words echoing softly like the strum of a guitar. I never asked you to be. She expected sleep to evade her, her doubts to return with the daylight. But instead she had slept more soundly than in years. Samuel glanced up as he tightened the cinched strap, his hat low against the rising sun. "You will be all right?" he asked, his tone casual, though his eyes were sharp with concern. Alara nodded, though shadows still wrestled in her chest. The world outside hadn't changed overnight. Folks still whispered, still judged, still drew cruel lines. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer carried her shame alone. As Samuel swung into the saddle, she stepped closer. "Why me?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling in the quiet morning. He paused, reins in hand, and turned toward her with that steady, unyielding gaze. "'Cause when I look at you, Alara," he said simply, "I see fire. The world tried to stamp it out, but it did to you. You are still standing. That means something." Her throat tightened, words trapped behind the weight of tears. He made it sound so simple, as if worth ones, something you had to beg for, but something already inside, burning whether others saw it or not. She swallowed hard. "What if I am not enough?" she whispered. Samuel leaned down slightly, his words calm, certain. "Then we will be not enough together, and that still more than most folks ever find." The sun climbed higher, pouring gold across the flat. For the first time, Alara felt her lips curve into an unguarded smile. She no longer felt like she had to prove herself, no longer felt chained to her past. For the first time she felt free. That day, as Samuel rode off into the horizon, and Alara watched his figure grow small against the sky, she realized something she had never truly understood. Love wasn't about erasing history. It was about standing in the present and choosing each other anyway. The cowboy hadn't asked her to be untouched. He hadn't asked her for illusions. He had asked only for her hand, her trust, and her courage to stay. And in that choice, Alara found her strength. When Samuel returned that evening, boots caked in dust, sweat on his brow, she met him not with hesitation, but with certainty. Their hands met again, as they had the night before. And this time there was no trembling in her grip. The world could gossip, the world could judge. But here, under the endless western sky, they were writing their own story. And for anyone listening, anyone carrying scars or shame they think make them unworthy, Alara, a story belongs to you too. You don't need to be flawless. You don't need to meet the world as demands. You only need to be brave enough to hold out your hand and believe someone out there will take it without hesitation, because love, true love, has never been about what the world demanded you to be. It's about what two souls dare to be together. So if you believe in stories like this, raw, honest, and human, don't forget to subscribe. More tales are waiting, each one carrying the same truth.